Uh, all right, it looks like we're live. So, Aron, thanks for taking the time to come on and have a conversation with me. I really appreciate it. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started? Awesome. And you're going for a degree right now. You're doing a lot of full-time schoolwork, right? Would you like to
Yeah,
tell us a little bit
I
about that?
did go back. I did go back to school for this. Yes. There's that. I just as I was I'm taking everything compressed and it's online, so it's little a lot different than being in a campus. But the compressed semesters, I have to do everything in 7 weeks, so it kind of intense the amount of stuff that has to be crammed in to a given day.
So you choose to do it online instead of go to a school? Is there a reason for that?
Oh, I would much rather like go to a school, but it wasn't in the cards to go back to a campus at this point. I mean, the only way we could really work it was to do online courses. My wife is doing the same thing. She's pursuing a master's of science writing at Johns Hopkins.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, much the same fashion. So we wake up, we get to our keyboards, we start doing our reading and researching and writing and all doing our homework. I mean that's the whole day, every day, typical day. It's an exception that we get to do something else, and almost every time that we don't do like we don't have time for video games or like uh, rarely any other kind of social interaction. Usually, if I have to speak at a conference, that's about the only time I get to be social with other people. Otherwise, my life is at my keyboard doing constant research.
Cool. So you've been debating creationism for quite a while now. Do you still do that quite regularly?
Yeah, I quibble with the term debate. I've had a few formal moderated debates, like on stage, and I've argued with a number of these people in what was called debates online, and I'm not going to do any more of those online ones because it's too much effort to not get paid for. If you're going to have to do a presentation, I don't see a lot of point in two people arguing past each other on a stage just to convince the audience. Though the audience has largely made up their minds in advance who they want to win.
Yep.
It has happened, though, that significant events will change people's minds in the course of a debate. I mean, I've seen a whole lot of comments that Ken Ham lost his debate against Bill Nye so profoundly that, I mean, 92% of viewers of Christianity Today or Christianity Now, I can't remember what the publication was, but they did the poll of 92% of their readers said that Bill Nye won that. And I have subsequently seen dozens of comments from other people that was the event that changed their mind and caused them to question their faith.
Yeah, I've heard a lot that I've heard a lot from atheists that they're really impacted by debates like the Hitchens, Harris Dawkins, all those guys. It seems like most atheists were once Christian and were influenced by the argument, so it seems like they do have an impact.
Yeah, there's a reason I quibble about that is because the way science, there are debates in science, but they're not done the same way. See, with religious extremism like creationism or flat Earth, I mean, these are just science denialists. You can literally do that game by saying "nuh-uh," and because your answer is God can do anything. You don't have any burden of proof to show to God. You could just make the excuse. Well, that's a metaphysical argument, but my God can do anything He wants to, so He becomes the default answer, even though it's a completely unsupported assertion. And you just get to naysay everything that we actually know. And then a lot of the arguments, a lot of these debates will pretend that we don't know what we know, or that no one even can know what we know. To pretend that you don't know that you exist. So I mean, this is a great way to dismiss evidence so that you don't have to deal with evidence anymore. I've seen with a lot of creationism that they just want to pretend that things are a certain way, and they know in many cases that it's not. I've gotten many admissions over the course of my life that if I could prove the point, if I had a time machine and can show that either that Jesus died and never got up again, or if you had a time machine and could never find Jesus at all, even though you can find Pontius Pilate pretty easily, you can never find Jesus or any record of Jesus, even with a time machine. Or if you could go back in time millions of years and watch evolution in segments, jumping past different time periods, especially when you're a young earther, if you had all of that evidence to disprove your point, I've had people confess to me that they would believe anyway. In one famous example of this, if this girl told me that if she watched Jesus's body die and rot over the course of an entire week, right, that she hopes that she would have the strength of faith to still believe even when she knows it's not true. And that's really the game. Faith is all about make-believe. It's about making yourself believe literally, right? And then not allow, and this is a confession that I've seen, and I put this in my book. There's a number of creationist organizations that post their statement of faith. Answers in Genesis, Institute for Creation Research, and a handful of others have posted their statement of faith, wherein they say in different ways that they have already rejected all the evidence there could ever be or that will ever be discovered. It cannot be valid if it contradicts the scriptural record. So they're going to believe what the man-made mythology says, even though it was written by ignorant and bigoted, superstitious savages who obviously had no idea what they're talking about. They're going to believe that over whatever the truth is. Truth doesn't matter at all.
Right, there's that example that Richard Dawkins uses where there's one famous scientist who went through the Bible and took scissors and cut out every little paragraph that contradicted the scientific thing. And then he said that if I wanted to accept the Bible or creationism, I had to give up all of this stuff, and at that point I just gave up science and said I have no career in science and just adopted creationism.
Exactly, that's Kurt Wise. So and I can give you another couple of examples. Andrew Snelling was a geologist in Australia, and he himself dated this one rock formation in the billions of years. And he goes through in his paper and he explains the different types of radiometric dating and the different types of stratification, everything that he went through, all the hardcore data that he went through to confirm that this rock formation is definitely in the billions of years old. At the same time, he was also writing articles for the organization that would later become Answers in Genesis, wherein he was declaring that all fossil strata was just the result of the flood. On the thing about the creationism, he knows that what he's saying is empty assertion based on absolutely nothing and completely indefensible. You could split Andrew Snelling in half, take the honest half and the dishonest half, and you could have them argue with each other. And the one would be able to show all of the data to prove that what the creationist Snelling is saying is wrong. They don't care what the truth is. The truth doesn't matter. I'm going to believe what I want to believe. That's what people tell me.
And they come up with post hoc rationalizations to try and justify what they believe.
Yeah, I had one guy. He believed some point. I can't remember what the trivial little point was that he believed, and I showed that was wrong. I mean, absolutely conclusively, that trivial little point was wrong. I didn't overturn his entire perspective. I just definitely disproved this one thing that he thought. Like maybe it was the thing about how Jesus split time. Because Jesus was born in the year 0, we started counting from there. And then I had to tell him about Pope Gregory, right? In the 1500s or so, creates the new calendar and then retroactively fits it to put where he imagined the year 0 was going to be in the year 45 of the Julian calendar. Show this guy that. Jesus did not split time. Here's why our calendar sits on Jesus's birth, because some guy guessed that it must have been here, and then
he got it wrong. He was several years off, right?
Well, the fact is, there's no year 0 to begin with, and according to the Bible, Jesus was either born before 4 BC or after 6 CE. As a matter of fact, he was born both. So there's a 10-year gap where Jesus can't exist. Jesus' existence is a contradiction. But Pope Gregory just decided that that was going to be a 0 and put that as his birthday. Yeah. So yeah, but I was arguing with this guy, and I showed that that point was wrong, whatever it was that he was, if that was the point that he was arguing. It was equivalent to that. It was some trivial thing that really didn't have a whole lot of import, but I showed that that thing was wrong. But it appeared to be one of the little urban legends that that guy really liked. And he got upset about it. He says, why can't I believe what I want to believe? Right. If you know that it's wrong, why would you want to believe that it's true? I mean, you already know that it's wrong. Because people want to believe what they want to believe. Some people. Now, we have people in two different categories, I see, that some of us want to understand. And we're not just satisfied with pretending that we understand like believers do. We want to be able to improve our understanding. We want to really understand. And the only way to really understand is to seek out the flaws in your current perception and correct them, realizing that you're going to have flaws and then finding them. And you're the only way for information or your understanding to improve, right? But believers, the wanna believers, the make believers, they just want to pretend that they understand, and they don't want to actually understand anything. They don't want to have the burden of proof. They don't want to question what they believe. They just want to assume it. And they want to be able to declare things as if it's a matter of fact. This is probably my biggest problem with religion is people say, oh, I know for a fact that God is real. No, that's not knowledge, and it's not a fact. You don't know it. That's an empty assertion supported by nothing, and it's an empty assertion of something that is also impossible. There's no possibility of a God. You don't know the things that you pretend to know. And then they bring up all these facts, and then every one of these facts that they bring up, you show that, but that's not what happened. Like the guy says that the blood was found in dinosaur fossils, and you show that no, you can't have blood. You could have fossilized heme. That's it. And in fact, that's all they found. Heme, which is an iron-based molecule, is the reason it didn't get replaced with other minerals, because it's already freaking iron, right? What's going to replace it? So we have the heme molecule. That's it. We don't have actual blood, and so that fact that you claimed is not actually a fact. And so they get upset and say, well, if you're citing facts that are not facts, that's dishonest. If you're pretending to know things you don't know, that's dishonest. Both of those things are tantamount to lies. So religion depends entirely on empty assertions of claims of absolute facts that are absolutely false, that are not supported by anything at all. It's all make-believe. It's an alternate reality that these people literally make up, and then use that to obfuscate everything we actually do know by pretending that we don't really know it. That's where the beauty of philosophy comes in, where how do you know that you're real? Because their position is so wrong, the only way they can be right is if reality is wrong too.
You recently had a debate with Fuzz Rana. Do you think he was asserting a lot of things like that, like there is blood in the DNA? Because he seems really well educated on the topic, and he wasn't making those kinds of claims, but he was definitely going with the second thing.
The conversation that we were having was supposed to be limited to, does biology indicate God? And he made the claim that he was an agnostic when he started his studies, and that his studies led him to where he was. But later in that same conversation, he made reference to the scriptural account, which was his go-to to verify whether things are true. So he didn't see it as that, and I didn't see that. I don't think that anybody in the audience realized that, but he contradicted himself. Because, and we're going to have a subsequent conversation where we're going to bring this up. Because,
oh yeah, you're going to have a follow-up?
Oh yeah, because we're going to be talking about the scriptural account, right? And this is going to be visiting back to the original thing that he said, that it was the science that led him there. No, it wasn't. Because even if there is a God, even if it's the Christian God, the Bible is still wrong about everything it says about the earth in relation to the rest of the cosmos. The Bible is man-made mythology, and that's why it's absolutely wrong about absolutely everything that we can really test. And evolution is still an inescapable fact of population genetics. That's if there is a God. The Bible is still wrong and evolution is still right with a God. If God exists, that's both of those things are still the case. So we got to have the discussion about what evolution is or shows, and the only thing that the only contest he had against that was that he's trying, as I said in the very beginning of the conversation, that creationists are trying to undermine science in defense of mythology. And later he confessed that it is in fact the mythology that he's trying to defend. There is no reason anybody ever rejects evolutionary science except in defense of mythology. Well, with one caveat, there is one exception. There was a crackpot that worked on the Human Genome Project who used abiogenesis to take over evolution or to replace evolution. So he was actually arguing that many different species of crabs would spontaneously assemble from random molecules and walk out of primordial ooze. That has to be the single stupidest thing I've ever heard from anybody with a college education.
And you said he worked on the Human Genome Project with
Yeah,
Francis
he
Collins
did.
and who was the other guy?
His name is Perennian and Senapathy, and he's or Senapathy. I don't know how you say it. It's an Indian name, and I don't know it. But that seriously, he's the one exception ever. But I'm aware. But absolutely every single time that people talk about challenging evolution, it is always in defense of Scripture, except for like this one guy. There's just like, are you fucking serious? I would love to talk to that guy. He wrote a book. He published this idea. This is the thing he's famous for. I would love to sit down with him with a cup of tea and just a handful of charts and show him, this is how stupid you are.
So I like to think of science as the methods we use to differentiate between reality and imagination. Do you think that's a fair characterization of what science is?
Well, science is a tool to improve understanding. I mean, so I guess that would be a fair assessment. There are different ways of phrasing, I think, the same thing.
Yeah, so I use that as my way of understanding creationism is they use the imaginary to try and define the real. They come up with ideas and try and
They're
back
not
them up.
trying to find the real. They're trying to make up the real.
Right.
It's literally the land of pure imagination. That's literally what it is. And the funny thing is, when you have different religions making up different, alternate realities for each other, a whole different, not just different pantheons of gods, but different concepts of, of what the afterlife is, whether it's nirvana or reincarnation or whether it's a continuous ghost state where you become the wise ancestral ghost who's now, giving counsel psychically to your descendants.
So what did you think of your debate with Inspiring Philosophy, Michael
Well,
Jones?
I thought I thought you can't seriously be wanting to debate this. Is Christianity dangerous? We have so many examples of Christianity being dangerous. The thing I couldn't have predicted, and this is another problem that I brought up with live debates. So I go first. I have no idea what the hell he's going to bring up, and I go through all of the list of all these different things, all the different ways that Christianity has historically demonstrated itself to be dangerous. And then he comes up with the excuse, well, that's just extrinsic religiosity, and by this handful of studies, intrinsic religiosity doesn't have all of this negativity. Well, that's true. Intrinsic religiosity doesn't have all that negativity. But I've never even imagined that somebody would try to come up with a distinction between extrinsic and intrinsic.
Isn't that just a fancy way of saying no true Scotsman?
Well, a lot of people brought that up. And there was a bunch of people who said that was a no true Scotsman argument. But what it really was, he was arguing that the belief is only dangerous if you act on it. And so I would have never, as I said, I would have never dreamed that somebody would then demand scientific studies to show that merely believing and not acting on those beliefs would be detrimental. I did find studies like that, having to do largely with your concept, with your grasp of science, obviously, your inability to distinguish the fictional from the real. That intrinsic religiosity also leads to some kind of brain defects, believe it or not. So yeah, there are studies that show this, but when you do a live debate like this, and somebody pulls out some trick like, well, that's just extrinsic, and so and then he accuses me of not having addressed the question. Well, what the hell was that about? The way that science does debates isn't for a show. It isn't for somebody to pull some trick while on stage. When they call out where all these scientists have discovered, and this is something that happened. Got another good example of this in a live radio debate that I had with this one pastor in Denver. He was making all these claims. I've got no way to verify them on the fly. Right? We're doing a live debate. He brings up all these things that scientists have discovered. Right? The hell? I've never heard of any of this. How do you rebut that? So I got him to agree to a written debate to follow the live debate, in which I get to read all of his citations that he brought up in the previous debate. It turns out none of them said what he said they did. And we do that over and over again. I debated with some other fundamentalist called Bob Dutko. And I said, give me an example of the one thing that your readers can go look up right now. Give me a citation that they'll be able to find online to verify that what you're saying is actually true. What's the best evidence you've got for dinosaurs coexisting with people, right? And so he brings up these swords, a cache of swords that were found with Hebrew inscriptions, pre-Columbian times, that showed images of dinosaurs, perfect visual renderings of dinosaurs engraved on these swords and surrounded with Hebrew text. And he said that's his best evidence. That's what his readers will be able to look at. I never heard anything like that. That's incredible. Literally, that's not credible. So
Well, yeah,
when
I
I
think
go,
like, where did they get the technology to do the engraving on the swords? They even have that technology back then?
oh, it's better than you think. So I go look up the story, and what it turns out to be was that somebody had made a handful of fake swords out of lead. Nobody would make a sword out of lead.
It's so heavy you couldn't lift it.
Well, yeah, they made these fake swords. They drew these dinosaurs on them, and it was made in the. They did the engravings themselves. They did the drawings themselves, the Hebrew script and everything, and then they buried the swords, not in an actual location, but they went to a place where people were going to dig, put the swords there, and covered them over with dirt. So now they know that these weren't permanently in that location. These are fresh burials, right? So this just the sand got covered over or whatever it was. I mean, you can tell when something's been in the ground a long time. It has a relationship to the ground around it, for example. But when you just cover it over with dirt, you can tell that wasn't there yesterday, what have you, or certainly wasn't there last year. But the inscription, this was like in 1931 was when the discovery was made, and the dinosaur, the one dinosaur image that I saw, was at the time that people thought that dinosaurs were giant lizards. And so there was a brontosaurus or a sauropod of that nature that has the forked tongue that we know dinosaurs did not have, right? So, but it's depicted with a forked tongue. And the Hebrew script written around it was copied verbatim from a textbook written in, I think, 1825 about how to, no, sorry, not 1825. It was 18, it was either was it 1925? I'll have to look it up. But it was written just shortly before the discovery was made. And I think it was in the late 18th century or 1800s or early 1900s, right around there. But it was a textbook on how to learn Hebrew. And it was just passages copied directly from the textbook. And then they tried to change certain sentences in ways that didn't make sense, meaning that the person who wrote it was simply copying and didn't actually speak Hebrew. So this was listed as one of the great frauds promoting creationism, because there's a lot of frauds, actual frauds, hoaxes, scams that are used to promote creationism. And this was the best evidence that Bob Dutko could come up with, that his readers would be able to verify.
Right, there's another one about the pots they make in South America that have like dinosaur engravings on them.
They're not pots, they're stones. And that was Dr. Javier Cabrera, who was a dentist, a Peruvian dentist, and he was paying people to carve drawings of based on there was a package of dinosaur toys that came out, little plastic toys that came out in like late 1960s. And these people would do renderings of these toys. They would carve them on the stones, and then would put like other like embellishments on them and things that we know didn't apply to actual dinosaurs. You know, like I don't know, extra toes, weird patterns on their bodies or whatever. Things that we know that doesn't apply. And then uh, Dr. Cabrera or whatever his name is would roll these stones in chicken shit to have them artificially aged. And so the whole thing, it was promoted that these were pre-Columbian artifacts and everything. And then it was exposed as a hoax on the BBC. And Answers in Genesis came out and said it was a hoax. And the Discovery Institute came out and said it was a hoax. And everybody except Kent Hovind. Kent Hovind will never admit any lie, even if it was somebody else telling it. Kent Hovind has no credibility whatsoever. He still declares, he's like the last person in the world who still declares that the ecostones are legitimate. Because he's been to that location, he's been to that museum to see the stones, and so has his son.
Yeah, I've had several conversations with him. I think I've actually made a lot of progress with Kent. As long as you're really kind with him and use really small words, you can get him to understand some things. Like he admitted that numbers work. I got him to admit that if you keep adding ones, eventually you'll get to a trillion.
Yeah, here's the mechanism. How did you get from point A to point B? Well, I walked here. How could you have walked here? And he's questioning whether walking is possible.
Yeah.
You show that walking is possible. Oh, okay, walking is possible if you need to walk 10 feet, but there's no way you could walk 10 miles. That's too much. Why not?
And then they said,
People walked 10 miles before.
and they said there's no such thing as macroevolution, but we actually have observed cases of macroevolution. Could you give us a few of those, like the best ones that you can think of?
Oh, well, there's 4 types of speciation that we've seen so far. And macroevolution, we can include a lot more in this category. We do have evidence of these things, but when we're talking about something that we can observe within a single lifetime, then about the only thing we can show is speciation. And according to educational sources teaching evolution, they give the definition of macro and microevolution is that microevolution is variation within species. That is like subspecies, different variations of tigers, like the Bengal tiger, Siberian tiger, Tasmanian tiger. These would all be examples of microevolution. Even though they're considered different species, depending on whether for sexually reproductive animals, are they genetically interfertile? Will they interbreed? If they weren't genetically isolated by geography. But macroevolution is where is variation between species. That's at or above the species level. That's the active speciation, where the organism is now separate from the rest of that gene pool and becomes its own gene pool, so that the new population is entirely into itself, not into its parent category anymore. And there are examples of that, like actually the tigers I just mentioned might be in that category. We look at dogs and wolves. We look at all the breeds of dogs that we've created. And when dogs no longer interbreed with wolves, or wolves will no longer interbreed with dogs in under normal circumstances, except under duress or in captivity, then they are considered separate species. Typically, wolves and coyotes won't usually interbreed either. Again, they're under duress, so exceptions to that do happen. But where a lot of people want to argue that there's the dog kind, or that they're all genetically interfertile, that's not the case, because not all dogs are domestic dogs. Not all dogs came from wolves. There are a number of wild dogs who predate wolves, things like Lacaia pictus, the African painted dog, the South American bush dog, the Asian raccoon dog. These are canids but they're not domestic dogs. They are not descended from wolves, and they cannot interbreed with dogs or wolves. They are two genetically distinct. And I've seen a genetic graphs showing, where these things are placed and how they have speciated. So we've also had the speciation occurring in the lab under directly controlled conditions. There's four different types: allopatric, parapatric, peripatric, and sympatric, I think is it. And it's all the different types of ways that you can get a genetic isolation out of an original group. For whatever reason, they separate. You can have one population, for example, that one group within that population changes their food source to depend more on one thing than on another thing, and then that one change of habit can divide the entire population, where usually what you end up with is a geographic distribution. You have a separation like that, where you have the sea levels are down low, like in the Ice Age, and you have organisms living on two different mountains or two different areas, and then the sea levels rise again, and those two mountains become islands, and now they're separated. So,
Do you have some
and
examples of those, like papers that you could list that we could look up
oh yeah,
and find
yeah.
those?
There's a couple that you can look up there. I mean, honestly, if you Google observed speciation events, there's one list, and then you can Google some more observed speciation events,
Hmm.
and then there's another list. But as I said, we've got four different. Speciation has occurred so many times that we've categorized it into four different categories.
Cool. I see you're wearing a Center for Inquiry shirt. Are you associated with them still?
I wouldn't say that I'm associated. No, I've gone to speak to a couple of their events, their invitations, so I'm happy with that. I have a lot of shirts for groups that I've spoken for or with, and so I try to promote as much as I can the entire secular community.
You used to work for the Atheist Alliance International, is that right?
I was president of Atheist Alliance of America, but I chose not to be president of that organization anymore, and have decided not to go into the reasons why.
And you ran for like Senate at one point for Texas, right?
I did run for state senate, and I was in politics just long enough to know that I did not want to be in politics.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, it essentially is little more than constantly begging for money. And the sad thing is that if had I gotten elected, um, I've noticed, I've seen that a number of other politicians, once they get elected, they spend all of their time trying to raise money for the next election.
Yep.
So that why does our system work like that? It's ridiculous. But in this last election, I was going against uh, big money. It was, they said in a normal election year, if this were a normal election year, then running for this district, you should start with $30,000. You should have $30,000 to begin with, to begin your campaign. I didn't. But if they said you should start with that, you should have that much already before you begin. However, this was not a normal election year, and my opponent had over 2 million.
Wow.
And this is for a job that is literally part-time and pays $21,000 a year. $2 million he's raised to keep that position. There was another guy that was running on it. There were no Democratic candidates running in my district for years. For the last 3 election cycles, there was no Democratic opponent. The Republicans would just have their primary and run unopposed. And so I didn't want that to be the case again. However, because of Trump, a bunch of people woke up and said, oh, if we don't vote, this is what happens. Yeah, that's how you get Trump, by abstaining from the vote. So suddenly there were 4 other guys running in the same district for the same position as me. And one of them was a golden boy. One of them was like that. He was such a star. And I'm like, I can't compete with this guy. This guy actually has a shot. Not only that, he was good at it. He probably the best candidate I've ever seen in any election. I'm like, I'm just going to give it to this guy. I'm done.
What was
I'm
his
out.
name?
Oh, you know what? Off the top of my head, I can't remember. Isn't that sad?
Yeah, if you find it, send it to me because I'd like to talk with him. If you think he's the best candidate, that's definitely an interesting conversation to have.
Kendall Scudder.
Kendall Scudder?
Yeah, Scudder. I went to a number of Democratic meetings, where, as you do, because you have to raise support everywhere. And I went to a number of these places where he was also, and I realized that this guy's really done a lot more homework on this subject than I have. And so I just put it together pretty quickly that he's young, he's really smart, he's really schooled, and that he's really passionate about it. He actually wants this job. It occurred to me that if I won, it would not be to my advantage. It would not.
Yeah, especially for atheists coming up in America, where atheists are the least trusted group in America. We have like 2 senators who I think are openly atheists or something like that.
Yeah. Now there are other elections I could have jumped into, like before the Trump thing overturned everything and did that I would have actually had a shot of winning, even as an atheist. But again, the offices that were available that I could have run for were not things that would have done me well if I had won. If I'd gotten that position, because they're low paying or unpaid and still require constant begging. So like, the UK does it completely different, where we have to start with $30,000. They're limited in some district to that in equivalent type of election. They're limited to £30,000. You can't spend more than that. That's brilliant. Why the hell aren't we doing it that way?
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense than just stupid, scary hordes of money being wasted. This is everybody else's money I'm spending. And there was other thing that while I'm trying to raise money for myself, I'm also simultaneously trying to raise money for hurricane relief in the Caribbean. And I'm like, I can't constantly beg people for money. It's bad enough that I subsist. My entire income is based on donations from Patreon. So you can't do that and beg for money for every other thing. And then people always want to bring up their fundraiser and have me promote. I can't I can't.
Yeah, man, mine too. I'm a full-time YouTuber also, so I know how difficult it is to try and balance that. It's hard to
Especially when
try and.
it starts demonetizing everything you
Oh
put up.
yeah, and the ad revenue where you just put it in the limited ads category because we don't like you.
Yeah, so they still get money, but you don't.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's the way that works. So if anybody is interested in my videos, and I really do need all the support I can get. So patreon.com/ARONRA. I have had to learn to promote myself some way like that, because if I don't, I won't make it.
Yeah, exactly. I put mine like in the bottom of the video of every video. So it's helped me out a lot. And we're in one of the most generous communities. The atheist community is one of the best. They're super generous, super kind, always supportive.
I wish that were true. I
We're,
live in a city. I live in a metroplex in which there are 92 mega churches. And a mega church is a church that has a congregation measuring in the thousands, multiple thousands, where Bill Dembski debated Christopher Hitchens. I was in that room. That room was a 7,500 seat sanctuary. That's 7,500 seats in a church, because a church needs 7,500 seats. The Melbourne Convention Center, where they held the Global Atheist Convention, was a 5,000 seat stadium. So I was in a church that was bigger than the Melbourne Convention Center.
yeah,
Think about
the private jets and the houses and the mansions that they all have, and it's all tax free too.
Oh yeah, yeah. So I mean, Ray Comfort gave a presentation in this church that I was talking about, Prestonwood Baptist Church in Plano, Texas. He gave a presentation there where he talked for 30 minutes and they paid him $1,000 a minute.
What, a minute? So
A
like,
minute.
wow.
So you want to talk about that the atheist movement is generous? Not as much as the religious right. Oh fuck no. They have all the money. I went on a tour of the biggest church that I've ever seen was in Houston, and that is a 16,000 seat stadium.
Which church is that?
That is Joel Osteen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, prosperity gospel stuff. Give me
What?
money. Go
Give me money and you'll be rich. How does
to
that work?
heaven. Give me money, you go to heaven.
Well, prosperity gospel isn't talking about your eternal salvation. It's talking about the money that you're going to make now.
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
give me money and you're going to get all these rewards. God will bless you if you bless me.
yeah.
So,
So I had a debate with Trent Doherty. He's an interesting character. What did you think of your debate with him?
who is that?
Trent Doherty, you don't remember him?
No.
He's a professor. It's all right. He was a professor of philosophy, I think. You're not a big fan of philosophy. Like you brought up the argument that they deny arguments like we could be the brain in the vat or something, or the Matrix, and just reject all evidence.
The reason that I don't like philosophy, I mean, I actually I do think philosophy is important. Philosophy would actually help people if we were to teach philosophy in high school, for example. It'd be hugely advantageous. The problem that I have with philosophy is the way that it is almost constantly misused, especially in the religious circles, where I was challenged that that my evidence is meaningless because evidence depends on reality existing, and I can't prove absolutely 100% conclusively prove that I existed 2 weeks ago because I might have been created with false memories as a part of last Thursdayism, right? So I mean
Yeah.
that was Matt Slick using that argument. And however, the point he misses, of course, is that if if reality is real, then I'm right, and if reality is not real, you're still wrong. Either way, why bring it up? You can't win this argument either way. So, but they still do. And as I said, because the truth doesn't matter at all.
Yeah. I saw your conversation with John Mark Reynolds. He was a philosopher. That was an interesting conversation. Same thing, pretty much.
Exactly. There was somebody who was arguing that reality isn't real. He said that facts are not facts because evidence is not evident because facts are not facts because nothing ever can be objectively verified because he is an idealist who holds this notion that reality is what you want to believe it is. And so you can't ever prove anything to where he would have to admit that he's wrong about something, period, ever, because nothing can ever be objectively verified. That was, some people call that idealism. I call it escapism. It certainly isn't realistic.
Oh, I forgot to ask, when is your next conversation with Fuzz Rana? You said you're having a follow-up?
Oh, we haven't scheduled it yet. We just said we're going to do that.
All right.
I don't know when. Yeah, and my schedule is surprisingly busy for somebody that doesn't make any more money than I do. It's surprisingly busy. Partly because I'm taking full-time classes, but also because I have to do 6 videos a month, and they have to be promoting science or attacking. I've got a number of different series we have to do. We're restarting our educational series. We used to call it Living Science, but there's some other company that's using the name Living Science. We don't want the confusion, so we're just going to change it to Unapologetic Science because we're teaching things that Texas was supposed to be teaching in all of their public schools. Legally, they're supposed to be teaching these things, and we know that Texas is not teaching these things. So we're going over a number of regular lessons that you would get in your like biology classes or whatever, but we're also including definite mentions of deep time and explanations of evolution whenever that is relevant to the lesson, because it often is. I gave a speech at the Houston Museum of Natural Science once upon a time when Ken Ham was supposed to debate me and refused, and then used Bill Nye as my replacement. That actually happened. But I gave this speech where I talked about all the things that Texas has by law part of their curriculum, and I'm talking to 200 people that were all schooled in Texas. Right? How many of you learned this in school? And those hundreds of people all went to school in Texas. We're not taught what was legally required to be taught in Texas because teachers want to avoid it. Teachers want to avoid it because they know that certain words have become trigger words for the religious right. So they would have congregations teaching their children that when you hear this word, you have this Pavlovian response that you start challenging the teacher and undermining that. And then if the teacher can correct the student in a way that the student could accept, well, then now there's a conflict with the parents, not just with the student and the parents, but with the teacher and the parents, because the parents are going to come after the teacher now. And so now the teacher has to deal with the parents, and the administrator will not assist. So the faculty is out of it. It's the teachers on their own. And so nobody gets taught anything. Consequently, a lot of people have been taking their kids out of public school to homeschool them for secular reasons, not just for religious reasons. It's funny. You have the religious right homeschooling their kids so that they won't learn forbidden knowledge, and that's literally the reason why they do that. And then you have people homeschooling their kids because they know that they're not actually going to be taught evolution in school unless you teach it at home.
Forbidden knowledge, but forbidden for a different reason.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, so evolution is forbidden knowledge the religious right doesn't want to learn, and for whatever reason, the schools won't teach it because they don't want the political controversy. You know, who wants all that headache? That every time you have to teach something, you have to make some caveat about your own personal position on the existence of God or whatever. It's absurd, and these are all intended to undermine education. It's part of a concerted effort to dumb everybody down.
Yeah. And you and your wife have been petitioning the Texas Board of Education several times. Have you had any success with that?
No, we've we've shown the videos that we've given to our testimony. We show the testimony of other people that are coming in as experts, you know, professors and scientists and historians and so forth. People all the expert testimony, and the Board of Education famously ignores all of that. They simply do not care, and it's actually worse with history than it is with science. We had 150 scientists come in and testify on behalf of evolution, and a dentist famously said, was the chairman of the board at that time, said somebody has to stand up to these experts. They're the experts. You're a
Wow.
dentist. You don't understand how this works. They don't care. They're going to hold their party line. They were all, these are voluntary positions. They got tens of thousands of dollars each. The religious right on that voting block got tens of thousands of dollars each from a single donor named Ted Leininger in order that they would all promote the right-wing religious perspective that he wanted. So it tends to be the most batshit crazy of the entire lot that ends up being elected chairman of the board. And for a while, that was the dentist, Don McElroy. Others have been just as bad. There was a more recent chairman of the board who announced that she would never approve any lesson that advocates human involvement in climate change or human responsibility for climate change, because she's basically owned by the fossil fuel industry, and she's going to promote that. So it's all very politicized. And so with history, they want to promote the American exceptionalism, that God ordained the United States to be how it is, and that God blesses the United States for being godly, that we were supposed to be a Christian country and all of that. So they're going to promote that. And it does not matter how many ministers come in and say, no, that's not correct. It doesn't matter how many historians, Jewish or Christian or whatever, that come in to say, here's the proof that none of that is true. Right? It doesn't matter. They're going to vote exactly the way they were told to vote when they started. Truth doesn't matter.
Yeah, and they're whitewashing it a lot too, taking out references to a lot of the African American culture and the Indian culture and their impacts on our society.
Yeah, I mean, whitewash didn't always mean literally white. But they want to take out every ethnic reference. They wanted to take out Thurgood Marshall as an example. They wanted to stop references to him. They wanted to minimize Thomas Jefferson and promote Jefferson Davis, you know, who famously used the Bible as advocating for slavery.
Yeah.
They don't care. They don't, and they've been proven wrong on every point. They don't give a damn. It's funny to me that people can claim morality while also deliberately lying to and misleading people, knowing that what you're telling them is false. And I got that admission myself from one of the people that was courting the board. The first debate that I had was a guy named Mark Ramsey, who said that he knew that transitional species did in fact exist in the fossil record, but he wanted to teach students that there were none, because he said it was important that they believe that there are none. So he confessed to lying to students knowingly. Truth doesn't matter. They don't care.
Are you optimistic about the future? Because I think the recent polls show that about 25% of the American populace is non-religious and over 50% of the UK is non-religious. Do you think it's getting better for atheists overall and that we're making progress?
We are. We are. We're running out of time, and we need to be doing a lot more, a lot faster than we are. And I'm speaking primarily about ecology now. I mean, the environment is a huge issue, has been a huge issue for a long time. We didn't have 4 years to go run screaming in the wrong direction under the marmalade Mussolini that we're doing right now.
Uh,
We should have been doing what China's been doing, which was they're at the forefront. Believe it or not, they're a big producer, big polluter, but they're also at the forefront of green energy.
right, solar
They just
power
opened
and
a
wind,
Tesla.
right.
They have wind and tidal generators completely green, right? And if people want to say that electric cars are, that you have to contribute all this pollution just to have an electric car because where are you going to get the power from? Well, it's green. They're the biggest producer of green energy, and they produce a huge amount of jobs by doing that. And we could have done that too, but instead, Trump said he wanted to revitalize the coal industry. And then, again, this is a guy who lies about everything he ever does every day. And so, again, truth doesn't matter. That's what it comes down to, honestly. Do you want to understand the way things really are and make them better? Or would you rather pretend that they're good anyway and just ignore it?
Yeah, and the sad thing is we have a lot of capabilities to really make a difference. Like we have the opportunity to make nuclear power a real thing. Like they're pretty safe, pretty cheap. We have lots of access to nuclear weapons, especially in America. We could really do that to cut down on emissions and CO2 all over the world.
Yeah. I'm hesitant, as I know a lot of other people are. And Bill Nye, for example, is hugely against nuclear weapons. I don't have firsthand information myself. I have apprehension. I want to, if we're going to be using nuclear power, we need to put in enormous safety features because. Did you see the documentary on Chernobyl?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's been four nuclear meltdowns: Chernobyl, the one in Japan. There's been one in America, and two in Russia, I think. Yeah,
Yeah, ours was 3 Mile Island, and the worst of all of them, I think, was it Fukushima?
I think so.
Maybe. So yeah, I'm hesitant. I mean, I want to find other means of green energy, and I'm totally down with solar. They created a solar field outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, which I thought was nice. I mean, they used to have they were running everything on Hoover Dam, and then they realized that the Hoover Dam can only provide so much power, and they have so many people there that Hoover Dam is 150 feet lower than it was when I lived there. 150 feet down. Lake Mead is practically gone. So they took steps when they realized they're not going to have any more water there. So they because there's so many people in Las Vegas now. Nobody takes into consideration vast overpopulation and what a problem that is. You have to be very efficient with your energy production and with your food production and food distribution, and we are so not.
Yep.
Not in any respect. We are flagrantly irresponsible in all of these things, and that's a travesty.
Yeah, America like wastes enough food to feed like four foreign nations.
It's not just how we waste the food; it's the way we procure it is unsustainable. The way we overfish the oceans, the way we can't sustain anything that we're doing right now. Gosh, it feels good to be doing what we're doing right now. We're probably living the best lives we ever had, and probably will for another 10 years or so before we all go extinct. I mean, we're about to have we're running at the level that we're like pretty much maximum what we can do. We have food abundances everywhere. Walk into a grocery store and there's food everywhere for us. But we've seen instances in the past. Archaeologists have seen, like, places like the Mayan cultures and everything. They had 25,000 people living in just a few acres, in Stone Age times, or a Stone Age culture, right at the end, right at the very limit of what they were agriculturally capable of, until you have a drought, and then you're like, hey, look what, we're all gonna die.
Yeah.
There's tens of thousands of us here and no food. We're all fucked.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Like what happened with the Russians, where they tried to regrow the same thing in the same spot and just wore out the land, and everyone just starved to death.
And that's happened a number of times, but Ireland, with the potato famine, you have a disease within crops. And we are at the point where we're running so close to this limit that one calamity can cause a domino effect where we chew up everything we've got left of everything else. We really need to change a lot about how we do transportation. I mean, we got to run screaming away from the fossil fuel industry. Just sorry, who cares about your profits for the next fiscal quarter? I want an environment for my kids to live in, and I want them to be able to eat things. There
Uh,
has been some consideration for that.
Adam in the chat asking, were you being serious when you said that humanity would be extinct in 10 years, or were you being hyperbolic?
No, the possibility exists that within 10 years we could have that. As I said, a calamity, something like the diseases, the potato famine. We've already stemmed off a number of things where we've been using so many antibiotics and other things that we realize that we have now superbugs. You get one new infestation of something previously unpredicted that could wipe out huge crops. Let's say the volcano in
Yellowstone?
Yellowstone. Yeah, that if that goes off and it did nothing else to our infrastructure at all, that could wipe out our agriculture entirely for a single year, and for at least a single year. And that we're the breadbasket, remember? So can you imagine what happens to all those fields of grain when we don't have 1 year without those fields of grain? And then I was going to go for a job canning fish in Alaska once upon a time, because they were offering that if you go up to Alaska, this was when I was a young man, they were offering a whole bunch of money that if you go up there for like 3 or 4 months and you live under these harsh conditions where you work for 14 hours a day every single day with no days off, and you just work in these canning plants, and they would give you this shit ton of money for you to go back home. So you're 4 days in a hellhole, freezing to death while you're doing this thing, and then you come home when all your debts are paid. So that was a very inviting kind of a thing for young men. But when I signed up to do that, they had to change it to where they would only do it every other year, because they realized that they were sending more and more fishing boats every year, but collectively those ships were bringing in fewer fish every year. Think about that. You send more and more boats, collectively they're bringing in fewer fish. What's that tell you? So they had to change it so they were doing it every other year, so that the oceans would have a chance to replenish. The oceans can't replenish when we have 8 billion people fishing the crap out of everything and polluting everything else.
And really,
We
it's
are,
not even the 8 billion. It's really just a small, like 1%.
we are setting ourselves up for a very serious problem that could realistically, as soon as 10 years, result in massive starvation, even here, even in the United States.
Yeah.
Now, what were you saying? I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I mean, it's a really tough situation we're in. It's a delicate balance between the economy and us, and it's not 8 billion people who aren't doing the fishing. It's really a small subset of people who are doing the fishing and you reaping all of the benefits, and most of the 8 billion don't really get anything from it.
Yeah, and America is largely responsible for the biggest part of that, because if you look at the food consumption for Americans as compared to the food consumptions for other countries, it is possible for I mean, we eat a whole lot more than everybody else does. We spend a whole lot more than everybody else does. We were also taken advantage of for this. We have the highest prices on prescriptions and medical care, and very often we don't have the best medical care, not necessarily because there's other places that are doing better than we are. But what I'm saying is that we need to be more efficient. We need to take our vast numbers into account. Certainly, if we're going to grow any further, and we're reaching an almost exponential growth rate. because when my grandmother was born, the population of something like had just crossed 1 billion people, if I remember correctly. And then when I was born, the global population was 3 billion. 3 when I was born. So think about it. From the time she was born, it doubled and then doubled again, right? And what in a single lifetime. So now what are we looking at? So you get this curve, right? So what's the next 10 years going to look like? If we were to somehow stagnate and only have the people we have now, then people may not be wondering, well, why would you say that in 10 years we're going to starve? That doesn't make any sense. But if we're still growing at this rate and you have a calamity at the same time, we're fucked. Lots and lots and lots of people are going to starve to death because we're not being efficient with our food. Even if we don't starve in the United States, we'll starve everybody else out first.
Yep. Yeah, those are the first ones that are going to be impacted are going to be the poor countries for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're going to have to make huge changes in how we do everything. And it doesn't necessarily have to cost jobs, because there's an awful lot of industry in a lot of the environmental things that they're talking about doing. There's a huge industry in that if we would just invest in it. But there are some things that we're going to have to take on that people don't want to. That automation is another thing that's just going to ruin this economy. I mean, how do you have, when trucks drive themselves and you no longer have truck drivers? Truck driving is the biggest industry this country has. If trucks go automated, as is taxis and Uber and Lyft, right? I mean, why does Uber and Lyft exist? Because people need jobs, so they will drive people around town, right? It's a great service to have. But when the cars are automated and the trucks are automated, there's no jobs. That's it. It's not possible to tell people to go out and get a job anymore, because 45% of the country is going to be unemployed. Because there's literally not a job to get. So either we have to stave off automation, which would be the thing to do, really. It would just be to criminalize automation. I don't want to get a phone call from a robot, ever. Period. Okay. Yeah. Especially the robots that are pretending to be people while they're trying to get me to buy their insurance programs. Try to connect me to an operator who can help me. You ever gotten these calls when the robot's pretending to be human?
Oh, what I do, I use those the corporations, they have those answering machines where you have to press 1 to leave a message or press 2 to do that, and the machines can't do that. So if you have one of those machines, you just filter out all of the automated calls. That's what I do.
That would be brilliant. Yeah, I don't want to ever get another robocall. I don't want to call somebody, and dial 9 if you want to, and go through the whole thing before you can eventually find you have to go sometimes 2 queues in before you get an option where if you press 0, even if they don't tell you to press 0. You can't press 0 the first time, and you can't press it on the second menu either, but maybe on the third if you press 0, or if you know what the code is to get to a live operator. No, it's a live operator. Whatever it is, I need a live operator. Out the gate, every time. There will never be a case where the reason I'm calling you falls into one of your pre-selected categories. No, give me a live fucking person who understands English.
Yeah. Well, one other thing about automation, I'm not opposed to automation, because I think that Yang has a really good solution to that, which is the universal basic income. Even if machines
You're going to have to go to something like that. He's right. That's a necessity. When we go full auto, I'm just talking about one industry. Right? Not talking about all industries, but we really want to avoid all of that, because the very people who are producing autonomous cars right now are also arguing that AI is our greatest threat. Seriously, think about that. So why are we automating absolutely damned everything? I go down the grocery line and they have your check out yourself line, right? I don't go to that. You have a cashier, that person's there to do a job. I'm going to go to the cashier because I'm sick of the automation. We should have people doing things. If you want to declare your love of capitalism, fuck automation, because automation will necessitate full-on socialism as a requirement. You can't avoid it. There's no way. because you can't have an economy where there's no job that people can have.
Yep.
Right? There you go. So dispense with the automation if you want capitalism at all.
I got a question in the comments. He asked, have you read Chris Hansen's hit piece, The Foundational Falsehoods of Aron Ra?
I have had talks with Hansen. I don't understand what his issue is with me. He recently blocked me from Twitter. He made a handful of allegations that like every time he hates me because every time we talk, I rage quit. When actually, every time we talk, I had him on video to have a conversation face to face, and then it turned out that his complaints in that interview, it turns out his complaints weren't really that bad, or they were things that I hadn't actually complained. Hold on a second. Where's the mute button on this?
I got it. I can do it.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, so some of his complaints were about on positions that I didn't even hold, you know, and he complained that I wouldn't admit when I'm wrong about something. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, I will, right? And so he's still. Here's the thing: we started out where he asked me about something that I said 20 some odd years ago, or like 1997 or thereabouts. I get into an argument with somebody about whether Hinduism is the oldest religion or whether it's Christianity. So I look up what's the oldest book of the Bible, for example. And this thing says the oldest book of the Bible is the book of Job. It's 1,500 years old. Okay, well, let me make sure of that. So I go to check a number of other sites. I see that 2 or 3 other sites seemingly independently also hold that it's Job and that it's 1,500 years old. Okay, so I guess that's probably it then. So then later, he tells me, Hansen tells me that it's not Job. And I think somebody else told me too that it wasn't Job, that they figured out that Job wasn't anywhere near that old. And that actually works for my argument better. Thank you very much. And now I'm being accused of, even after he corrected me on that, and I accepted the correction, he's still criticizing me for the same damn thing. And even after we had the live interview where we had this discussion, he still criticizes me for it. He said recently that I refused to change my mind until some other guy chewed me out about that, when that guy didn't chew me out. I already knew. And so I'm asking that guy, so I was told that it was this, and now I hear that it's not. And he says, yeah, well, that's true. And he goes into the reasons why. Yeah, that's what I want, right? I don't understand what the hell his issue is with me.
Right, you meant 1500 BC, right? Not 1500 years old.
Yeah, 1500 BC. So I don't understand what the complaint was. I'm going to get things wrong. I happened to cross something that fortunately he didn't bring up. Well, yeah, he did. He did bring this up. I found about the sexagesimal numeric system of Shurapa, or yeah, I think there you had a means of counting. It was a bizarre means. It's nothing like what we have now. Before there was a zero. They had counting by base 60. Right. So if you measure out a clock, basically, is how you do this. But it was they were counting on indentations in their fingers. So you have a mark that you would add to the number that you could make it 600, or you have another mark that you could add to the number to reduce it to 6. 666. Right. I thought that was too much for a coincidence. Wow. A friend of mine who is a scholar on history, or becoming one rapidly, explained to me that it was actually a numerology that implies Nero. Well, that seemed to me, that was a little disappointing, but okay, I accept correction. Great. But I'm being accused of not doing that. It doesn't matter that Chris Hansen hates me for whatever reason he hates me. I mean, so if I get something wrong, and I've told him this over and over and over again, go ahead and correct me. I wish that it didn't have to be riddled with pointless insults and allegations that I am refusing correction when that's clearly never been the case. I respect his scholarship. I've told him that. If I'm wrong about something, tell me why I'm wrong. And then that will be constructive. Instead, he goes and writes a book, which includes things that he thinks I got wrong that I didn't actually get wrong. And he's not the only one to do that either. There was another one, Tim O'Neill, wrote a huge hit piece against me, telling me Aron Ra gets everything wrong. In fact, A lot of the stuff that said I got wrong were positions I never even held. He just assumed that I held them. And so far as I can tell, the everything, I got 2 things wrong, and only one of them was relevant to my point at all. Only one. So Aron Ra got 1 thing wrong. And the one thing I got wrong was that I thought that, what's his name? Augustine was arguing for a flat earth. Why did I think that? Because the largest website for Catholics in the world says that. The largest Catholic website themselves said that Augustine was arguing for a flat earth. Because I don't just read the thing and then leave it. I actually go check other sources. Now, if the other sources are wrong, that's all I can do is check. Okay, here's the largest site. This is the most cited, the most sourced resource for all of Catholicism. They say he was arguing for a flat earth. Okay, so he's not arguing for a flat earth. I tried to check it. The source I checked was wrong. What am I going to do?
Yeah, I find those are the most frustrating kinds of critics, are the ones who don't represent your position at all. They criticize you for something you never said. You're like, how do I respond to this? Like, this is not my position.
Yeah, no. The other thing that the guy said I got wrong, that he actually did get wrong, was that I described, just for the brevity of, because I'm writing I can only speak so much in the time that I have, right? So I made reference to Hieronymus Bosch, and I called him a monk because I read some other article that described him as a monk. And when I went to look up why, it was because he belonged to this order that was monastic. Well, it was monastic previously. It wasn't monastic when he was a member. So it was originally just priests and monks. So if you belong to a monastic order, I consider that probably makes you, monastic.
Yeah.
But it turns out that didn't have anything to do with the case that I was making. So it didn't matter. And then people want to argue that that Giordano Bruno was not convicted of, for the reasons that I gave. Well, I'm sorry, Giordano Bruno was convicted on 8 different charges, and 3 of them are the ones that I listed. You can't say that he wasn't. If he's brought up on 8 charges, they don't say we're going to convict you of all except for these 3. I didn't see that anywhere. So
Yeah, it was heresy, right?
why people want to misrepresent me the way that they do.
Yeah.
I've been completely open with Hansen, and he just. I go through the thing where I go to check 2 or 3 other sources, and it turns out that and they seemingly independently, they're not quoting from each other, right? So he says that I'm doing it on rumor. This is after we had a very cordial conversation face to face. If we solved that problem back then, why are you bringing it up again like it's still a thing? I'm not remotely interested in misrepresenting anything or being disingenuous. I mean, it's like Carl Sagan once said in his book Cosmos, he said that Moses had invented monotheism. Now, I read that and I'm like, okay, well, Carl Sagan doesn't know about that Moses didn't exist, very, very likely to begin with, nor did he realize that if Moses did exist, it wouldn't matter that monotheism already existed before Judaism, and it wasn't originally, and that Judaism isn't the first monotheistic religion either. The Zoroastrians were already doing that, and arguably, you could say that Akhenaten was trying to promote a form of, and some people have argued that Akhenaten that the belief in Amun Ra could be related to a monotheistic position too, or Akhenaten. No, not the belief in Amun Ra, but never mind. Anyway, I can say, okay, well, he's wrong about that. Do I need to write a hit piece about how Carl Sagan's best-selling book has deceived millions? No, I wouldn't be such a dick. So.
It was just a minor error. Everybody has minor errors, and criticizing everyone for every minor error they make is just ridiculous.
Especially when you make when you write a book, as Hansen did, to list everything he could find wrong, including things that I didn't actually get wrong. So. And some of these things I've seen other people taking him to task on Twitter about how pedantic he is, about how he's arguing things that people actually support, that whether Noah was an independent concept or was Noah based on like the
Epic of
Zeus and
Gilgamesh.
so forth. I mean, that's commonly understood. I mean that people accept that these prequels in the Library of Ashurbanipal, there are too many parallels. You have too many specific parallels to say that Noah is a completely independent construct. You can't do that because I mean
Like the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? That's one of the comparisons.
exactly, and the Epic of Atrahasis has too many parallels too. So yeah, it was. I think I was unjustifiably criticized for that. Now I'm open to criticism, granted, and if anything, Hansen and O'Neill have gotten me that if I'm ever talking about history, that I need either to express that this is just my opinion based on what I've said, or I have to specifically mention, as I have already done a number of times. I've been accused of not naming my sources, but I already years ago started naming when I'm talking about history. Very often I will name the person according to this person, because you have to say that, because then it's his ass if it turns out to be wrong. So if I'd said according to the world's largest Catholic site, Augustine was arguing for a flat Earth, well then it's on them, and I won't catch a ration of shit from him biting my ass all the time.
Yeah, I get that a lot from like Steve McRae. He's just as pedantic on the same kind of nonsense criticisms.
Yeah, and as I said, I'm completely open to it. I'm not perfect, and I learn from the process. I have I've achieved the position that I have on the position, meaning the perspective that I have, by finding out I was wrong about other things that I used to believe. I got into huge arguments with scientists and such about whether or not we are monkeys. Why do I advocate that we are monkeys? Because I used to hold their position until I got into a huge, passionate, angry debate with somebody that's just every bit as hostile and hateful. And when they are so, it made it really hard to eat all that humble pie, to come back and realize that, you know what, despite the fact that you're a complete dick, and I really don't want to admit this, you're right. And I've had to change my position because of it.
That's actually my favorite part of debates. That's why I like debating professors and philosophers from all the different fields, because it's the best way to learn is to have them to explain to you why you're wrong about something. Then you can go back and research, like, oh, I was wrong. Here's something new, and now I can improve my position. I think that's the
Yeah, the guy that I am now is quite a bit different than the ex. I just quit my job tattooing when I when I looked up that thing about what's the oldest book of the Bible. So I would say that my acclamation to scholarship now would be significantly improved over 1997. So but yet I'm still catching crap for what I said way back then. Yeah, and I'm trying to minimize, always trying to minimize the number of errors. I try to do as much research as I can in the time that I have to make sure that I don't say anything wrong. But because I figured out a long time ago, that the religious right, I used to argue on Talk.origins back in the days of Usenet, and I found out way back then that the religious right, they can say whatever the hell they want. They didn't care. If you're an old Earth creationist or a young Earth creationist, they don't give a fuck. As long as you believe in the God thing, you can say everything wrong that you want. Nobody's ever going to correct you. But on the science side, I get anything wrong ever, and my own people will come down on me. So that's
that whole peer review science thing is how we grow.
yeah. And your own side will be absolutely unforgiving and vicious if you get anything wrong. So I've learned to be careful.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. I really appreciated the time, and it was a great conversation. I'll imagine you're pretty busy, so I'll let you go. And I'm getting hungry. I need some food. So thanks.
Okay.
See
Thank you much.
you later.